Alzheimer's Foundation taking the learnings from these films and putting them more into a mainstream perspective and perhaps changing the way we look at things?
That's a great question. Yes, my answer to that would be on the awareness side. Yeah, we have had, in partnering with this film is kind of almost as, our partnership with them is creating a ton of awareness for people to get to them. As far as the scientific advancements, I think that's their own process of, what they're doing all the time and learning and growing as far as that's concerned. But yeah, this film has been an amazing partnership that's been bringing a lot of attention to them, which has been great. I don't know.
Yeah, and I would say, hey. Yes, I would say that the fact that they got behind this film, this is the first time they've ever made any kind of investment into any project even remotely, similar to this, and I think that's for sure a step in the right direction. And I think the tide is starting to turn with regard to these organizations recognizing that prevention really is the key to moving the needle.
Totally.
Good question.
Another question? Sure.
Great piece. It was beautiful. It was heart-wrenching and informative, which is a tough deal with. But I was curious, there was some pretty good evidence that carbohydrates was maybe overdoing it, especially with sugar, could possibly lead to some problems down the line. Exercise was mentioned. When you were researching it, did you find more evidence that increased exercise, and what kind of exercise might be good for prevention?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, for one, I do want to mention the carbohydrate thing. I think the real take home that I felt we tried to achieve in the film from a dietary standpoint is that, junk food is really at the epicenter of, much of our problems. And a lot of the junk food that we're consuming tends to be, replete with added sugar and refined grains and all that stuff. And so it's not necessarily the carbohydrates per se, it's the junk food, just the overwhelming preponderance of junk food. And from an exercise standpoint, yeah, I mean there's a ton of evidence now on exercise as it impacts the brain, and it's almost to the point now where we have a prescriptive level of evidence. It has, at this point, essentially a disease-modifying effect in a complete vacuum of any other option. I mean, we do have really solid evidence on exercise, and now it's starting to bear to light that resistance training is also very effective, because for a long time it was primarily the focus was on aerobic training, but now we're starting to see lots of good data coming out showing that really building strength and resilience and robustness is really key as well as cardiovascular health. So yeah, exercise is super important.
Another question? Anybody?
We like questions.
Yeah, they're up in the middle, yeah.
I saw that you had visited some regular allopathic doctors. Did you guys ever go to an alternative, like herbalist or acupuncturist or naturopath, or any kind of, we call them alternative, but they're actually more, older medicine types, and just wondering if you accessed any of that in the short, in for your mom.
I think we tried a lot and nothing really helped. We tried transcranial magnetic stimulation, which there actually is some good evidence for in certain conditions, but nothing really moved the needle for my mom, unfortunately. And but that's I think one of the other cool take homes from the film is that once you've been diagnosed, you're essentially in late stage Alzheimer's disease. Even if you were just diagnosed yesterday, you are in late stage. And so just think about what it would take to turn that tide. A condition that has been simmering below the surface for 20 years. It's just, yeah, it's kind of it's a heart-wrenching and hopeless scenario. There's nothing that I've seen that has a dramatic impact. That just doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, sure, right here.
I found it fascinating that one doctor or scientist said that if you have a vaginal birth, breastfeed, and no antibiotics the first year, then you're on a good path, but you could screw it up later, of course, with all the sugar and everything, and then get the markers in your body. Did you ever look at vaccines?
No. No. I mean, my mom had all of them, I'm sure, but we never explored that.
My question, yeah.
Are they doing research with stem cells and maybe Alzheimer's? I know that they've done that with like Parkinson's.
Not to my knowledge. We did actually try a stem cell treatment that was initiated, or my mom's boyfriend Sam discovered some guy in Long Island who was harvesting some stem cells from like fat tissue and nebulizing it and blowing it up the noses of patients with all kinds of conditions, and we spent 10 grand on it and it didn't do anything. Yeah, that's my only experience there.
Yeah, sure.
Question for all three of you. You've done a lot, you've experienced a lot, and you're all growing and raising families and starting your lives. What do you see and act and do differently?
Chris.
I'll say that when I first started watching all the raw footage for this movie, I was in the middle of eating a bagel. And that fucked with my head. For sure. I can't tell about the future, it's hard to say, but I will say that in the process of editing this movie, I lost probably 20 pounds. Because I just kept like being terrified of like my kitchen when I'd go home from work, and I would open the cabinets and I was like, oh my god, everything I'm like creating a thing for the public to take home, and am I a hypocrite if I don't listen to the thing I'm making, you know, which is a wild, weird brain thing to kind of, you lay in bed and you're staring at the ceiling going, do I believe this? Do I not believe? Because if I do, and I believe in the art that we're making, I gotta listen to it, right? And so then I had to convince my wife to not buy bagels for us anymore, and you know. But I do think that like Chris prior to this film and Chris after this film is a completely different person, and I just hope that everyone who watches it understands. It's a choice. It's up to you to decide whatever you want to do. There's no solutions in this film. It's just sort of, hey, some things we learned. You may want to pay attention to them. If you don't want to, you may end up in time forgetting them whether you know it or not. But, you know, you have the option. So I decided to take the option.
Yeah, and you know, this film is so unique. You know, Max, you know, this film is really accounts for you filming really almost all of your life from being a little kid even. And you know, Chris, you came on in this film and have been making it and working on it for about 2 or 3 years now. As even a question for the two of you as co-directors, you know, Max, what was that like, kind of letting someone else come in and edit your life and be a part of that process?
Yeah, I mean, it was essential having Chris involved, because you know, I'm obviously so close to all of the footage. I would never be able to create something as vulnerable and intimate as Chris was able to. I mean, I've said this a few times now, but there are actually scenes in the film where I hear the impatience in my voice, and it makes me like cringe, you know, like, how could I be so impatient with the most important person in my life who's clearly struggling? But I think, you know, as anybody who's ever seen dementia up close and personal will attest to and recognize, there's an incredulousness, you know, like you just can't believe that like what you're seeing is reality, you know, like is my mom faking it? Is she trolling me? You know, the fact that she was like trying to open the door seemingly by the towel rack, you know, in that final scene in the bathroom, it was just there's no way to really grasp that, you know, that kind of situation. And Chris, you know, I sent him 2,000 hours of footage, and and he just
Yes, you did.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, what he was able to do was just remarkable with it, and I wouldn't have been able to edit that myself.
Yeah, and I have a thought here, because I think that we can all agree. I don't know of anybody who can have the courage to sit in the middle of their mom telling them that she wants to die and not just drop the camera and go, I'm done with this. This is not important, and just go hold her. I can't even delete like videos of like the food I'm eating last week that on my phone, let alone make the executive decision on a film. What footage of my mother makes it, and what footage will the world never see again? And so it, like, you have to separate that. And it was like crazy important for for this film to become this film of like, Max did the hard legwork of just creating a puzzle and gave me 2,000 pieces and said, make whatever picture you want, I'm done. Like, I did my part. And so to me, it was just like, what are the most beautiful and impactful puzzle pieces that you captured? And then everything else is just for you to know for yourself, keep it private.
Word.
Yeah, it was clear you went through a lot emotionally on this journey with your mom, and were there for her and stepped up in incredible ways, and you were an amazing support son and caretaker, really, and it's inspiring. And I guess the question I have is, looking back from the time of diagnosis to the end, is there something you would do differently if you could do it again?
I mean, I think that was the hardest time of my life, and I mean, I could say that I'm really glad that I was there. I moved back to New York, that I continued to, throughout that whole period, prioritize self-care. That was really important. I think it's, as trite as it might sound, you have to put your oxygen mask on first. I don't know how I would have made it to the other side without being an alcoholic or something, had I had not, continued to work out and do all the things for my mental health. But I mean, if I could go back and have done anything differently, it would have just to have had even more patience, in those moments where I detect in my own voice frustration and impatience. I don't know if you guys could hear it, but I hear it, and I'm just like, I don't think I had a choice in the matter at the time, but there's something that I learned about that I didn't know back then that I guess I wish I knew. There's this concept of, when you're with somebody with dementia, the instinct is to, like I was doing, like, Mom, just read the freaking thing that you wrote. Like, why can't you just read the freaking thing, And of course that's coming from me, like, in disbelief that you can't read what you just wrote 5 seconds prior. But there's this idea with dementia, it's actually called therapeutic fibbing. And with dementia, you're actually, the most compassionate thing to do is actually not to test them, challenge them. You just go along with it. And I don't know if that's the best, I don't know if that feels like the best way to do it, but that seems like, at least, in some moments, it might have been the better option.
Maybe one or two more? Yeah, down here.
My mom is one of 5 kids, and 2 of them have dementia. And she's living in fear of getting it, and she's doing all these things, exercise and diet and everything. And I was wondering if there was, through your time in this film and all the research that you've been doing, what is like the number one thing I can tell her that, that might be either advice or something she could be doing to improve her own health, or maybe help guarantee her longevity?
Yeah. Well, I would say for one, I would look at the 3 big, well, there are a few, but I would say the big they're called modifiable risk factors. Modifiable implying obviously that we have a degree of control. And so I would say, familiarize yourself with those. Some of the big ones being obesity, hypertension, and type 2 diabetes. Just don't be those, which I know today is easier said than done, but that's important. And depression is a risk factor. We're now learning that chronic exposure to polluted air is a risk factor. So these are all the well-identified modifiable risk factors. And so without being overwhelming about it, I think it would probably be of value to just kind of familiarize yourself with those and identify where your mom, like where she might be exposing herself to undue risk, if that makes sense. And exercise.
Also, sorry for your family for going through that.
So sorry.
Yeah, right on here.
Actually, just answer. And of course, because I was curious about the role that pollution and microplastics.
The role of pollution and microplastics.
Because they cause like low-grade inflammation
Mm.
in the body too.
Yes.
The second thing, my husband's father died of Alzheimer's.
Sorry.
And, my condolences to you. I could relate to a lot of what
Mm.
he saw.
Very difficult to watch. I didn't clap, not because I didn't appreciate it wasn't good. It's just, it's hard to clap for something like that. I had to watch my father, who was a brilliant scientist who worked at Rand down the street here, lose his best facility. But I want to add something that's also difficult for you. One thing that was missing, I think, was a look at society. For example, you were talking about, what was the term you used, preventable or?
Modifiable risk.
Modifiable. That's modifiable for some. So like, I have diabetes now, but I've controlled it thanks to my wife, who's put me on a diet very much like what you're eating, low in carbohydrates, very strict. We can do that because we live here in this little bubble, in this area, where we can get organic kale, we can get wild salmon, and we have the money to do that. But not everyone does. You go down to South LA, try to find some good organic kale down there, or who can afford it.
Yeah.
And, like you were saying in one part, how sugar became affordable, because it was once just for the rich. That was because of the transatlantic slave trade. And the ones who are suffering the most now are the ones who got exploited. So there's something in our larger society that's pushing this, and we need to be aware of it and work towards doing something about these food deserts.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, I completely agree, but nobody's impervious at the end of the day, and I think we all just have to do the best that we can to get this information out there. I mean, we live in an amazing time where everybody has all of the world's knowledge at their fingertips 24/7. How are people using that technology?
And I think you're absolutely right. I think especially the nature of America and the West in this way for sure is there's commenting on society and the larger societal plays, the ecosystems we all live in, and the large companies making processed foods are winning this battle right now, undeniably, and it's not going to stop soon. And I think I am proud of a film like this and trying to droop one drop of awareness into this bucket. Even the cereal and all the stuff there's so much that we make available and cheap for people that's hurting people. And we do need to fight, I 100% agree, as a society to create much more, to create opportunity for people to have better foods and better opportunity and loving each other and helping each other do that. And so couldn't be more right about the need for us to have larger societal change. I totally agree.
We're saving all of that for the sequel, Even Smaller Boxes.
That's right. That's right. Question in the back?
I'm just curious, when are we gonna be able to see this again? Not in a theater, but like.
Great question.
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning would be great.
Yeah, no, we're going to be kind of touring this for about 2 months in different cities and doing that in these kind of limited theaters. And we're so excited. You guys will be the first to see it in LA. So exciting.
Thank you all for coming,
Thank you
by
all
the
for
way.
coming. Absolutely. On our website, loyaltyboxes.com, in about 2 months, it's going to be widely available there. Actually, we'll do it all available there, and then it'll go to like Amazon and other places to get very, very accessibly a couple months after that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're so excited.
Yeah. Maybe one more? Anybody else? No?
Yeah.
Sure. Here, there you go.
There's 2 left. We got both.
All right, wait, sure. In the front, yeah.
Let's get a question from Blake over there too.
Oh, we'll get to
I know he's
that's
got a
right.
good one.
There was a scene where your mother said, "I'm depressed and I don't know why."
Yeah.
How far, what was the time between that scene and when she was diagnosed with her Parkinson's? And did her depression play a role in her mental health later?
That's such a good question. That scene affects people differently. For me, I cringe because I just think about the overprescription of antidepressants and how 1 in 4 women over 40 is on an SSRI today. And to me, that was just like my mom's saying she's not depressed and the physician trying to treat her depression. So to me, that's maddening. But other people, I've screened the film with other people who didn't necessarily pick that up, But yeah, the intro shot where she says.
I think you were like a teenager.
Yeah, I mean, my mom had a stressful life. Her divorce was stressful. The business was stressful. She was very a sensitive woman, but she was never somebody who, I would not think of her as somebody who was chronically depressed. And the Parkinsonian stuff happened a couple years prior to the Lewy body, prior to that doctor's appointment.
Yeah, here, we'll go to Blake. Yeah.
Blake.
I know, like with diabetes, with heart disease, you can kind of see that coming, but with Alzheimer's, it's kind of frustrating because once you get the diagnosis, it sounds like it's kind of too late. When you got that first diagnosis with your mom, if that happened to you today, what would you do differently? Would you double down on exercise? Would you move to the country for fresh air? What would you? Because I already know how you eat and exercise.
Yeah, I would probably. That's a great question. I mean, I would probably. Yeah, I mean, I would ratchet up the exercise. I would make sure the air in my home was as clean as possible. I wouldn't, I would probably try a ketogenic diet. To be honest, I mean, that's not a diet that you really can push on anybody because it's a hard diet to adhere to. But keto has become trendy in the diet sphere. But the ketogenic diet as a therapeutic tool was first put into practice 100 years ago in the setting of epilepsy. And there's decent research now that as a therapeutic tool for neurodegenerative, more broadly neurological conditions, that it might be helpful, not necessarily not as a cure, but there are now studies that are starting to show that it can lead to some degree of improvement. So I would definitely take a kitchen sink approach. I would try that. I would start exercising more, look at nutrient deficiencies and the like. But the sad thing is there is no cure. Nobody's ever survived Alzheimer's disease, which is really, really terrible.
Yeah, right on here.
Earlier you said your mom was vegetarian. Growing up, she was vegetarian.
She was like pescatarian, I would say. Yeah, she never ate red meat ever, and she never ate eggs. She was afraid of cholesterol, and she was an animal rights activist, so she didn't. Yeah. She loved animals, and I think, I think that it might have contributed because my mom consumed a lot of refined grain products that tended to be marketed on the label as healthy, fat-free, cholesterol-free, red heart healthy logo on it. I just remember growing up. I mean, I don't know if that was causally related, but I just know growing up, my house is full of that stuff. If it was low in fat, low in saturated fat, low in cholesterol, it was a free ride to be consumed, and we coped with corn oil, which had the Red Heart Healthy logo on it, and we ate margarine instead of butter.
Skim milk. Did you guys do that?
Yeah. Well, my mom started drinking like almond milk when that became a thing. But yeah, she was like, we ate a lot of processed foods, and my mom was, you know, we lived in New York City growing up, so I do think that a more whole food centric diet. I would never want to blame her. I'll never know if it had anything to do with her diet, but I do think that, you know, a more whole foods diet would likely have been protective to some degree.
Yeah, sure.
Menopause. Yeah, one of the researchers that we have in the film, Lisa Mosconi, she's the preeminent Alzheimer's menopause expert, who's published a lot on that link. And it's not an area that I know too much about, but I know that estrogen generally is protective to the brain, actually. But then during that menopausal change, it's sort of like the rug getting pulled out. And if, you know, you're a woman and you have comorbidities on top of that, like insulin resistance, et cetera, then it probably creates, you know, the perfect storm. And population health, you know, men and women are very unhealthy generally today. So it's an area that, you know, we need a lot more research, but Lisa Mosconi, she's written some really incredible books specifically on that topic.
Let's do one more. Sure, yeah, Susie.
Do you think these blood tests that they're doing are predictive or can determine if you really will have Alzheimer's at a later age?
There's some blood tests that make headlines that seem to have high predictive value, but nothing has made it into, you know, I guess usual clinical practice. I think it's the risk factors that are still primarily what's looked at, and then there's imaging stuff that you can do, but it's very rare to get that covered by health insurance, so it's just not standard of care. But you know, I would say generally making sure that your lipids look good, your metabolic health, blood sugar, insulin, all that stuff, inflammation levels, your homocysteine, those are all really important modifiable risk factors. But beyond that, I don't know of any sort of gold standard singular, you know, biomarker associated with the condition.
Yeah, and you know, certainly as the film talks about, and you know, we're artists and filmmakers, you know, in that way, and you know, this is a very complicated disease. It's, you know, very, very nebulous, and I think two things that, you know, with this film I would encourage everybody, and it impacted me as we were making it, is one, just living intentionally in the first place. I think that most people are not living intentionally with their diets day to day in most capacities in most of the world, and living intentionally, number one, and two, you know, something takes all of us one day, and remembering to be intentional with those that you love while you have them. I think that Max was an unbelievable paramount example of, I hope I am as good of a son as you goddamn were to your mother, if that happens in my life. I think that's something that inspires me to give them and work with you, and yeah, I think that's a great testament to this film as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, hey, thank you all so much for being here. We're so grateful that you're here for us. We'll be outside and all that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and if we could ask a favor, share on social media if you feel so inclined, and also consider leaving an audience review on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's right.
That does help.
Fresh.
A fresh rating, an audience review
That's
on Rotten
right.
Tomatoes.
Only if you liked it. No.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.